Hi everyone, I'm Rose Martin, and we're right around the corner in Bedford, Virginia with crime writer Diane Fanning. So she has 14 crime novels, 10 mystery novels. She has an amazing blog where she talks about crime, she talks about what's going on in her world, and also people that get away with murder. Her latest book, and I've got to tell you, this is the third in a series set in World War II, where a feisty chemist, Libby Clark, has got to uncover and find out what is going on in who is making trouble for the rest of the chemists. This National Award winner and Edgar Award nominee has plenty of stories to tell. Diane, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
It has been so much fun learning about you, and I guess I want to start by, I read your last name, your maiden name is absolutely true. It is? What is it?
Butcher.
And I have to tell you, I read that and I thought that can't be true.
Well, my dad's family really thinks I should have written under my maiden name, but I figured if I did, everybody would think I was making it up.
Right, because, you know, a lot of people would think, oh, that's a little trite, right, for what she's doing.
Yeah.
So let's go back to a 9-year-old Diane. You had a really harrowing experience as a young girl.
Yes, I was walking with a friend of mine up to the little local country store, and we lived in a neighborhood that was part suburban and part rural, and so you'd go through a whole bunch of houses and then you'd see cows. We were walking through a rural part, and we had just started down a hill when this man came up and asked us for directions to where he wanted to go. So we were trying to explain to him, and he said, "This isn't making sense to me. Would you come here and show it to me on my map?" So I went right up to his car. He'd opened the door, but instead of a map, he was exposing himself. And I was in shock, and I sort of froze in place, and he grabbed my upper arm and tried to tug me into the car, and I was resisting as much as I could. Just then, another car came up over the ridge and laid on his horn. He let go of me, he took off. But being a big fan of Joe Friday on Dragnet, I watched all the repeats.
As a 9-year-old.
Yes, I knew what I needed to do, and that was to memorize that license plate number. So I did, and I went home and told my mother. The cops stopped that car, and when they did, they found in the trunk of his vehicle the evidence that he had sexually assaulted and murdered an 8-year-old girl the month before. And that meant I was about to be the next victim.
Oh, that gives me
And I
goosebumps.
just got lucky. And it raised a lot of questions in my mind. Why me? Why did he pick me? And how could anybody even do this? So I started reading about that, and it sort of became an avocation for me all my life, reading criminal psychology books and things of that nature, trying to understand what motivates a person to do something that is so inhuman, and try to understand why I would have been a victim, and basically learn how to not be victimized again.
Wow, at the age of 9, you had that insight, and then continue to turn something
I was a weird
that
child.
was harrowing into well, look at what it's done for your entire career, that
Yes.
early knowledge. But then you end up in chemistry, doing some things with chemistry, and then you end up in the advertising field, and you've got 3 kids, and congratulations on all your Eddie Awards, by the way, from your other career in advertising. And so I'm thinking you end up in Texas with these 3 young kids, and what happens?
Well, one night, my husband was working that evening, and I was just scanning through the channels, and I came across 48 Hours. And there was this little 10-year-old girl named Crystal Searles, and she was telling about her ordeal. She had watched a man kill her best friend, and then he slit her throat and left her for dead before he left the house. She had the courage to get out of that bed. She made the assumption that everybody else in the house was dead, because elsewise, how could he gotten there? And she walked at 4 o'clock in the morning down this dirt and gravel road that was surrounded by rattlesnakes, scorpions, cactus, you name it, and went to the nearest house half a mile away. At that house, Herb Betts was up already in that morning because it was New Year's Eve day. And he liked to watch New Year's Eve coming in all around the world. So the beginning of the day was being celebrated with fireworks over on the other hemisphere. And so he was watching that. She came to the door and she couldn't speak. But he realized right away what kind of a problem she had. And she asked for a piece of paper and a pencil with hand motions and wrote, "Everybody is dead." So they called an ambulance for her. They called the police. And she was airlifted to San Antonio. Once she went through surgery, she still was incapable of speech. Her vocal cords had been severed. In fact, the knife wound nicked the sheath that surrounds her carotid artery. It's so like with millimeters to killing her. And she got out of surgery and wrote, "Bring the police." The police came and they brought a forensic artist. And that little girl who could not speak was still able to communicate so well that they knew who the killer was that very night.
Oh my.
And they located him and they stopped him from another planned murder he had. He was going to do another murder before he left town. It was just amazing. And that's how it led to his 2-decade crime spree of murdering men, women, and children, with whatever weapon was handy at the time.
Wow. And how does her story play into what happened next for you?
Well, I heard her story, and it resonated so much with what happened to me when I was 9 years old that I had to write her story. So that's when I started working to that end. I got an agent. I went into the jail he was in at that time, because although he'd already received a death sentence for that crime, he was in Bexar County in San Antonio for another murder. And so I went in, I met with him there. Well, he was eager to meet with me because, one, he hadn't had a single visitor and had been there 6 months. And the other, like most inmates, seeing women is an oddity, and he was looking forward to that, which is bizarre. But, you know, we started talking. The first thing he wanted to get money from me, and then he wanted me to talk dirty to him, and neither one of those things worked. So we actually then got down to brass tacks and started talking about the crimes he committed.
How do you open a conversation like that?
I usually start with, you know, childhood stuff. That's easier because they can tell you about the childhood. And I'll tell you, his childhood was so horrible that I didn't even believe everything he was telling me. And then I called his mother to get verification of it. And she said, "Okay, what did he tell you?" So I told her all the horrible things that he told me. And she said, "So what? A lot of kids go through that and worse, and they don't turn out to be killers." And I'm going, that's where he got it from.
How do your family, when you've got 3 children and your husband, when you first were watching that show and you're like, you know what, I'm going to write this story, what was their response, and then how has it been subsequently?
I didn't tell them until I told my husband I was right away, but I didn't tell any of the kids to actually have a contract. And it's funny, they had nightmares.
Like, Mom, what are you doing?
Yeah, but I never had nightmares. And I think the process of writing, the actual writing process, really exorcised all the demons for me. And honestly, I was pretty naive. I mean, I didn't know criminals. And I went into this thing and it was like, I don't know what I'm doing and I'll just go for it, you know? I really wanted to break into professional writing.
And what a way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I even, towards the end of the book, I was having a problem because somebody was carrying anger at Ann Rule, so I contacted Ann. And she said, "Oh, yeah, they wanted me to do that story, but I didn't want to do it because it was too much work." And I'm going, oh, here I am, ignorant me.
And in the middle of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, 2 decades is a long ways to trace back. And like some of the records I needed were in libraries on microfiche, which will make you go blind if you look at it too long, I think. It was a good experience. I mean, I really learned the hard way.
I was touched that you said when you described her and you're watching that show, you're like, you know what, she's my hero, because she was in that position and she stepped forward and she did the right thing, as hard and as scary. I mean, it's hard and scary as an adult. I can't imagine as a child.
I can't either. I mean, it was like what I did, but then times 100.
Right.
And seeing her sitting in that courtroom, dressed in pink, looking totally innocent and untouched, except for the scar across her throat, raising her little hand and pointing at Searles and saying that he did it. I mean, I can't imagine the inner courage that child had to have to do that.
Have you had any contact with her since?
No, only indirectly. And she's been doing quite well. She did very well in school. And you never know with survivors. They're either really going to make something of their life or they're going to go into the background. And it seems like she's heading in the former direction, yes.
Well, when we talk about Searles, the fact that you would interview a serial killer was scary enough for me to read about it. I can't imagine being on the other side of the glass wanting to ask those questions. Do you ever feel manipulated by them or afraid?
He always tries to manipulate. Okay. I was well aware of it, and the only way you can handle it is to manipulate back.
And how do you do that?
You don't let them know what you're really thinking. You never let them know that you're feeling judgmental. You make him think that you are merely curious, that you're fascinated by him, not horrified by him. And for me, that was the biggest challenge, because I am a heart on my sleeve kind of person.
Right, me too. I'd be crying. I'd be all nervous.
Yeah, and the crying, most of my crying was talking to victims' families.
Sure.
But the one time I did cry with Searles was when he described to me his mother had let him go live with a pedophile when he was 7 years old. And he talked to me about that first night and his first sexual assault and how he felt that night curled up in a ball on his bed. And I thought, my God, if only anyone could have gone in and plucked that little boy out of that situation, he might have become a worthwhile citizen. Instead, he's destroyed so many lives.
Yeah, so even as a serial killer, you had a sense of compassion.
For that little boy.
For the little boy.
You can't not have compassion for that little boy. He went through a horrible, horrible childhood. Yet, although it may explain why he turned out the way it was, it does not forgive his adult decisions.
Sure. Well, he was pivotal in another case you worked on too with Ray Harper.
Yeah, Julie Ray was convicted of murdering her 10-year-old son. She got a 65-year sentence. And there was a show on 2020, and it talked about her. And I tell you, I started out very skeptical because there were her family and friends and lawyers talking about how wonderful she was. And there was her saying how she was innocent. And then the prosecutor came on. And once I finished listening to the prosecutor, I thought in all likelihood that woman was innocent. Because he was saying things like, nobody ever comes into your home and takes a knife from the kitchen and kills someone with it. Well, I'm sorry, Searles did that on multiple occasions. And other people do too. That just happens. And he had all these sort of mythical statements about crimes like these. And it was all out of whack. And I thought, something's wrong here. And one of the things he said, which he also said to the jury, was that they recovered no stranger fingerprints in the house. Well, I find out later, they never dusted for fingerprints in the house, so of course they didn't recover any.
Wow. Well, that led to a wonderful award for you, as a matter of fact, finding and helping her. What was that award?
Well, I wrote the book, and it led to me getting the Defender of Innocence Award from the Innocence Project in Southern Illinois.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, I'm fascinated because you don't hide behind the curtain. I mean, you go face to face and you dig in and you find your research. Is there anything that's off limits where you've said, no, I don't want to go there?
You know, I would have a problem writing about incest, I think, because of the fact that I'm more into the people, and that is so alien to what people are supposed to do. It's like you don't have someone who's uninvolved that becomes a victim. So it's an odd thing. You know, who knows? I mean, maybe someday I will write a case that involves incest, but so far I haven't.
Well, I think you've got plenty of material from what you're doing. Do you get bombarded by people in prison or, you know, family members who say, my family member is also innocent, or we need your help?
Yes, I hear, because of the Julie Ray case, I'll hear from a lot of people. And what I normally do, if it looks like there's even the shred of merit in it, I will pass it along to an investigator I know with the Innocence Project and let him make the determination, because I feel like I really got to understand Searles and how he communicated and the way his communication indicated truth or lie. But that doesn't mean I can do it with all of them. You know, and quite frankly, a lot of times there are people who claim to be innocent who are not. So I send it to someone who's more qualified to deal with that than me.
Well, you also won a prestigious, or you're the finalist for the Edgar Award. And what was that award granted for?
That was granted for a book called Written in Blood, which was the Michael Peterson case. Recently, that case has created new interest because of the Netflix Staircase series. It's the same case. The original footage that was taken, that was incorporated in this, was done by a French film company, and I was there at the trial, and I know that they came in convinced already that the man was innocent. And when they put the film together, they left out what was, to me, the most crucial and damning information. And they were slanting it very much towards the defense. My book was not slanted that way. I believe he killed her, and I believe he killed the other woman 16 years earlier. And I think that the proof was all there. With his wife, the second person that he's suspected of killing, he had given a story that would have required about a 45-minute timeline from the time his wife went in the house and he came in and discovered the body. Well, in Kathleen's brain were something called red neurons. Red neurons are only in existence when you slowly bleed to death for 2.5, 3 hours.
So you definitely researched these in order to get to the bottom of what's happening.
Yeah.
And you know, it fascinates me that as this path has grown for you, that, you know, do you read other true crime books, and what do you think makes a good true crime book?
I do read other ones, and some of the contemporary writers that I like the best are Catherine Casey, and she was a good friend of mine, still is. We met up in Texas, and she has very much my focus on the people rather than the crime. And so I really do enjoy her. There's some true crime books I've read that I thought were more focused on the crime than on the people, and that bothers me.
Well, and I think, you know, your fiction books that you write, is that almost a break from the harrowing, like, why could people even do this, to where you take yourself out of that mindset and you say, you know what, I'm going to create a story that's mystery, it's crime, but it's fiction.
Yeah, because, you know, you can see only so many coroner's photographs and only so many crime scene photos and talk to only so many victims before, you know, you get to that brink where you're going to fall into despair if you don't do something.
I think so too. That mental break is important. So the Sabotage series, set in World War II, you've got Libby, who is a chemist, a strong female character, and we're going to chat about the third book, but bring us up to speed on the first two before we talk about the third in the anthology.
Well, the first book, Scandal in the Secret City, Libby is getting her degrees in physics and chemistry, and her cousin that she'd been very close to growing up died in the bombing in Hawaii on Pearl Harbor Day, and she lost a cousin, and she had like her own fantasy version of that happening that she knew wasn't true, but it kept replaying in her head.
And the Secret City was actually a place where they would bring people in to work on this secret project, which was the gadget, right? So we find out as that weaves through the first, the second, and the third book.
Yes.
But then Libby takes charge and has to solve some things that happen. We were fascinated in the second book with Libby's tie to Bedford, right here in Virginia.
Yes, yes. She in the first book, it's kind of vague that she was born and raised in Virginia, but then I get more specific about exactly where it was in there because that is when D-Day happens,
right?
And the Bedford boys, I'm sure people around here all know about them. They played an important role in D-Day, and she knew some of them growing up. So that tied it here, and was able to bring in things like People's Furniture delivering a mattress because they were here during World War II and still are here. So that was a lot of fun to gather the local connections and put them into the book too.
And the third one, the one that was just recently released, lead up a little bit to us about that.
In the third one, Libby's mother is actually in prison because she killed Libby's stepfather. And honestly, he was one of those guys that out in Texas they would say he just needed killing. And but she killed him to protect her son. And she got sent to prison, and she was dying in prison at this time. So Libby is really, her roots in Bedford are making new demands on her in this book.
Would you read some for us?
Sure, I'd be glad to. This is in the middle of the case, and she's been trying to find out who is doing the sabotage. It's obviously an inside job, and one of her co-workers got picked up, and this is his story about what happened. He stood with both palms resting on the surface of the table. He leaned toward me close that I could feel his angry spittle on my face as he shouted, "Do you think I'm stupid?" Then he pushed away from the table and walked to the door. Crenshaw asked, "Do you need anything, Mr. Abbott?" Before I could ask for something to eat or drink, the chubby man turned back to the table and said, "He gets nothing until he tells the truth about killing those men in the locomotive." I was left alone again for hours. When Crenshaw returned to the room, he was alone. "Mr. Abbott," he said, "that man has no patience. Stop being stoic. He won't care if you die of thirst. Let's just start with the names of the people in your little group of troublemakers." I asked, "Who is that man?" "He is a government agent." "Which agency?" All I was told was that it was a secret government agency. I was told I did not need to know anything more. Do you even know the man's name? "I do not. I have filed complaints, but I doubt if anything will come of that. I am doing my best to have all of you released, and it would help my efforts if you would give me the names of the others involved in your group." "You know none of us will give you names. None of us will betray our friends." "You may believe that now, but there are things that man could do that would make me give up my mother. You need to reconsider." I turned my head away from him and refused to say another word. He left then, but the sessions with Crenshaw and the man in the suit, or Crenshaw by himself, continued with long pauses in between. I'd nap with my head resting on the table every chance I got. The next morning, the man came in with a soldier. The soldier set 2 battery charging cables and something that looked a lot like a car battery, except that an electric cord was attached to it. He plugged it into a wall socket and pulled a pair of pliers out of his pocket and set them down next to the battery-like thing. Then he left me alone with the unknown agent. Without saying a word, the man clamped the cables to the device and raised up the two ends, making them touch and send off sparks. He set those down and picked up the pliers with his right hand and squeezed them down on the tips of his nails on each of the fingers of the other hand, as if figuring out the best way to grab them and jerk them out. The unspoken threat made my ears ring.
And there's more to come.
Yes.
What a great trilogy. Maybe a fourth?
Maybe a fourth. I'm waiting to hear if the publisher wants a fourth. I'm ready to write it.
Wonderful. Diane, thank you so much. It's been wonderful meeting you and sharing some of the work that you're doing. If you would like to know more about Diane, the work that's coming up, some of the other projects she's working on, and a little bit more about her life, make sure to check us out online for a continued conversation. Special thanks again to Diane Fanning for inviting us into her home right here at Bedford to talk about her life and about her work. And thanks to you for watching. Make sure to tell all of your friends about us, and I want to see you next time right around the corner.
Production funding for Right Around the Corner provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Anne Ray Foundation, and by viewers like you. Thank you.